everybody. Hope you're all having a wonderful day. Thomas Sheedy here at Atheist for Liberty. I always try to stay up to speed on different cultural war events and issues. I've become kind of an ex-addict, and when I was going to bed last night, recording this on the 27th, so the night of the 26th, I'm paying attention to my X feed. And I see that a great, wonderful, lovely friend of the organization, Hemant Mehta, who just loves me, and I of course love him back so much. He shared an article from the Atlantic, um, basically that goes after Richard Dawkins, quoting, "After he took his last bow, the lights went out, and I tried to understand what I was feeling. I didn't leave the show offended. I wasn't upset. It was something milder than that. I was bored." Womp, womp, womp. Very, very dramatic stuff. Giving a little bit of an overview here, guys. Richard Dawkins is on his final tour, promoting his latest book, The Genetic Book of the Dead. And joining me is Jake Klein, Virginia State Director of Atheists for Liberty, guys. Jake did a phenomenal job being Richard Dawkins' special guest in Washington, D.C. recently, and I was privileged to be in the audience to see Jake do well. Jake, your speech was excellent. I think everybody in the audience, had a wonderful job. I think Richard Dawkins also knocked it out of the park. First off, how was the experience actually hosting and actually getting that moment to be on stage in front of everybody?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you for the kind words about it. So special guest means opener. So I did 5 to 8 minutes before Dawkins, and then the host, his interviewer, Stephen Levitt of Freakonomics, they had about a 90-minute chat. So I'd prepared 8 minutes about my experience reading The God Delusion, and how that changed my life in a really positive way, and how now that we're about 15 years into the future from that, how the culture war has changed, and how our critics say that filling the void of religion has just come, all these awful things, and so we need to go back to religion. And so I was kind of trying to navigate that situation and to say that I think our critics have some points that are right, which is that there's really important uniting stories, and we may have lost that, and that is an important thing to have, but those stories from religion, those just aren't going to cut it today. And so if you want to solve that problem, we got to find a new way. So I said this, I had a great time. I think it did go very well. I think the audience was into it. I got some nice applause. Dawkins couldn't actually hear it. And my fiance Salome, she was the opener when Dawkins performed in Austin, and he couldn't hear that one either. So there's, I guess, acoustics issues in some of these theaters. So I had the event producer send him, text of the speech after. But his work has been very meaningful to me, and so I was really proud to have that opportunity. I think it went well. Apparently not in the view of the Atlantic, though.
Yeah, not apparently in the view of the Atlantic. And spoiler alert, I read the article, guys. I think it's dead wrong. We're going to go over this Tim Pool style. And of course, because Tim Pool loves us and loves atheism too now, totally. And we're gonna see how wrong the Atlantic really is together. And Jake just does a really good job promoting Black Sheep as well, and he has a new book that's out. And once this video becomes a recording and we release it, we'll include all the details down below of all that too. Just one other thing I want to add before we get started on that, everybody. When I was in that theater in the audience, it was packed. It was packed. There was such a demand and such an interest to see Richard Dawkins still years later continue to give commentary, not just on religion, not just atheism, but about science, about evolution, about all these amazing things that he's known for to educating the world's population on. And I've only gotten just a smidge into his new book. The illustrations too are just absolutely phenomenal. If you guys get the opportunity, he's still going to be speaking in LA, in San Francisco, in Portland, and I'm actually going to be the opener, the special guest for his Portland show, and then in Vancouver, and then he's going in Europe. So if any of you guys have the opportunity to get tickets, please, please do. It is worth it. It's phenomenal. But of course, not everybody likes to see Richard Dawkins become so successful when it comes to still promoting his works years later. Of course, the woke religionists, or whatever we want to call them, at the Atlantic and the Hemants of the world, they don't like that Richard is successful. They don't like that this next generation of the atheist movement too is being promoted through Richard Dawkins as well. They hate it. And they want to do anything they can to still stop us from progressing. So let's see what criticisms they really have of us. And Jake, feel free to stop me at any point too, so you can kind of give commentary on all of this as well. So here we go, guys. From the Atlantic, Ross Anderson writing that Richard Dawkins keeps shrinking as his career wraps up. A man of big ideas takes on ever smaller targets. Ooh. So we got him starting out by saying, for nearly 5 decades, Richard Dawkins has enjoyed a global fame, rarely achieved by scientists. He has adapted his swaggering Oxbridge eloquence to a variety of media ecosystems. He began as an explainer of nature, a David Attenborough in print. His 1976 mega bestseller, The Selfish Gene, accepted readers with the generation to generation mechanics of natural selection. It also coined the word meme. Yes, Dawkins created memes. In 2006, The God Delusion, another mega bestseller, Dawkins antagonized the world's religions. He became a leading voice of the new atheist movement. His talks and debates did serious numbers on YouTube. Refusing to be left behind by the social media age, he also learned to get his message across on Twitter and then X, although sometimes as a bully or troll. See, this is when, of course, the criticism now really begins. Now at age 83, Dawkins is saying goodbye to the lecture circuit with a 5-country tour that he's marketing with as his final bow. Earlier this month, I went to see him at the Warner Theater in Washington, D.C. Dawkins has said that when he visits the U.S., he has the most fun in the Bible Belt, but most of his farewell tour appearances will take place in godless coastal cities. After all, Dawkins has a new book to sell, The Genetic Book of the Dead. At the Warner, it was selling well. I saw several people holding 2 or 3 copies, and one man walking around awkwardly with 9, steadying the whole stack beneath his chin. The lines of my books snacked away from the theater entrance and ran all the way up to the stairs. It was longer than the line for the bar. Agreed. Yeah. Like it's just a fact that he is such an eloquent writer, and he's been known as a successful writer for basically half a century. So it doesn't really matter where the event is. It kind of just shows you that he is very, very well known. And if, maybe if Richard Dawkins was alive 20, 30 years ago, maybe he would be in more cities. But he's still doing the best he can. At 80 something years old, I know he had a stroke or a heart attack in 2016. And this guy is still going to numerous different countries, still going on shows like Piers Morgan and other national shows, still making his voice heard when, a lot of other people in their 80s, they'd just be retired.
He seems in great health from my interactions with him for 83.
Yeah.
I mean, traveling the country, the world at that age is not easy. At this point in the article, there's not that much to say, but
Yeah.
it did just strike me as a little snarky to say, after all, Dawkins has a new book to sell.
Yeah.
Maybe I'm reading into that too much, but as if it's a
not.
bad thing to go to the cities where your work sells and to play one of the largest theaters. And, it's this, there really is, I feel like, this hate for success amongst, woke people. I'm going to get criticized for talking about the woke in this article later, but against woke people, from the left, from Marxists. This is sort of the exact thing that I was talking about in my speech. This is something to be praised, to be thought of as wonderful, this kind of success that he has so many people interested in his books, selling stage show tickets, traveling the world for this. So to just hate on it, it's exactly the sort of trying to undo really positive aspects of our culture.
You're right about
that I spoke out about.
Yeah. And by the way, really, really excellent speech. I hope that there's a video version of it that releases in the future, that everybody can see together. And you're right about that snarkiness. Like if you look at just the bit of the last sentence in the first paragraph, although sometimes it's a bully or troll describing how he's active on Twitter, aka X. It's like he's stating facts in the first two paragraphs, but of course he has to have that snarkiness and add in that negativity because we can't allow Dawkins to be successful without calling him some cishet colonizer or whatever Islamophobe these days. And of course, the meat of all of that is further down in the paragraphs below. But of course, you just know how the article is going to be, without even fully reading the rest of the content. So it's kind of sad to just predict that these days with how culture is now. We got paragraph number 3. Okay, he says, I ordered a whiskey and went to find my seat. The packed theater looked like a subreddit come to life. Bald white heads poked above the seat backs. Of course, you got to do the DEI quota, everybody. As did a few ponytails and fedoras. I didn't see a single fedora there. Okay, guys, I sat in the middle of the theater. I ridiculous.
I didn't either. You're correct about this. Listen, if this was the audience, that would be fine, and I would have no problem with it, except for the fact that he's pointing out these physical appearance stuff to just go really low. Yeah. But it's another problem when it's actually not even true. This is not the audience that was there. Basically, everybody I saw was in like mostly business casual attire. There were some people in like t-shirts and jeans, but not with a fedora, not with a ponytail. This is flatly not correct.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like, even now, like you can just see how he's over exaggerating or even possibly making stuff up. Saying possibly for legal purposes, everybody. So he continues by saying, this being an assembly of free thinkers, there was no standard uniform, but I did spot lots of goatees and black t-shirts. The faded silkscreen graphics on the tees varied. One was covered in equations. Another featured a taxonomy of jellyfish extending onto its sleeves. The people had not come here merely to see a performer. Dawkins had changed many of their lives. Oh, so negative that Dawkins changed their lives. A man in the row behind me said that he had attended Dawkins' show in Newark, New Jersey the previous night. As a Christian teen, he had sought out videos of Dawkins, hoping that they would prepare him to rebut arguments for evolution. He ultimately found himself defeated by the zoologist's logic and gave up his faith. Yeah, that's a good thing. That's a very good thing. Oh, here we go. Evil Jake Klein is up next. Jake Klein, the director of the Virginia chapter of Atheists for Liberty, told a similar conversion story on stage. Before introducing Dawkins, Klein said the God delusion had radicalized him against the Orthodox Judaism of his youth.
Millions of other Let me stop it there.
Experiences. Yes.
I don't know if maybe we do want to do the whole paragraph, but I can really go sentence by sentence with this because how do you want to do it? Do you want to finish the paragraph or should we go sentence by sentence?
Let's go sentence by sentence. That's fine.
Okay. All right. So let's talk about this first one. Klein said the God delusion had radicalized him against the Orthodox Judaism of his youth. So that's true that it did radicalize me against the Orthodox Judaism of my youth. That's fine. But that's actually not really what I said on stage. And I think it's interesting that he uses this term radical here. So what I said was that reading the God delusion gave me the courage and my convictions to pursue my happiness, to break free and to pursue my happiness. Is that so radical? I mean, Orthodox Judaism is a famously restrictive lifestyle. I think that framing of it, that really negative framing of it, like I said something that I thought was really positive, really optimistic, this ability to have a self-directed life, like a life of my choosing when I was raised in a very restrictive culture. The negative language there, this author, I bet he's an atheist himself. He seems to be. He doesn't say that he's religious at any point. But yet he just seems to want to attack the event and Dawkins so much and in any way that he can, that any place he can find a way to use some more like snide negative language, he squeezes it in. So, I mean, just why do that? Like,
because they want atheism to be social justice oriented. They want the atheist movement to be people that care about, how many people of this race or this gender, or, how many people with blue hair, are in an audience or at an event or are speakers at a conference. They are obsessed with this, and they would rather have a massive social justice movement filled mainly even with religious people or religion even leading the charge in it than a healthy, successful, vibrant, secular / atheist movement. That's why they despise Dawkins. They despise his success. That's why they despise, Jake, you and me at Atheists for Liberty. That's why the moment you said Atheists for Liberty, I like our name because it just deters woke people and it deters wokeism automatically. He had to get that in there and use that as a weapon to show his audience, aha, they're not part of our special brand of atheism, our social justice religious brand of whatever we want secularism to be. You're a threat. Dawkins is a threat, and so you must be criticized, even anything that's positive.
I think it's just sad to go through, and this is going to come out through the entire article, so our viewers should understand, of course, we've read this whole thing already, so we're talking about it in the context of the whole piece. But just like the sheer negativity of going through life, going to an event that you're not going to like in advance because you already have these feelings about Dawkins, to shit on it and to write your hate piece. That's not a good life, and it makes me sad that about humanity, that there's an instinct many people have to make that kind of choice.
Recently, I feel like I've been on a binge of criticizing like this new religious right that's been upcoming, but like the more and more I see the feed of these people that we had to kind of break away from years ago, or were forced to break away from years ago, it also reminds me of like, okay, yeah, these people are a problem. These people really did poison the well of our community, and we wanted to try to get along with everybody. We wanted to be heterodox with everybody. We wanted to be fine having people, even that we disagreed with, at our conferences and events. They didn't. They don't want the Jake Kleins of the world to be successful. They don't want the Jake Kleins of the world to be platformed. So you must be automatically painted in the most negative light. I like that Atheists for Liberty got mentioned just for our own sake, right? But you can see the reason why he immediately put your position in there, at least with us, right? Is because, it's an automatic negative to our audience. Jake Klein needs to be painted in a negative light. What's the one thing that I can immediately say about him that'll turn off Atlantic readers, right? And that's what he's doing here. That's the game he's playing here.
Yeah.
And it's disgusting that it's gotten to that point where this is just journalism now. This is just our culture now. This is our country now.
I agree completely. This is very disappointing. I think it's good that less and less people take this sort of thing seriously. More and more people just in general know that this is how the media operates. But it's sad because I do think we need to have some sort of institutions that people can consider trustworthy to go to for information, that they don't just feel like they're getting whatever the politicized slander version of things is. And The Atlantic is a subscription magazine. This is not supposed to be something that's publishing clickbait. That model was supposed to help publications not fall to those incentives. So, right. And so it's very disappointing to see, especially at the Atlantic of all places, this type of content. This writer, as we continue to go through this article, pay attention. He does not argue a single point about why you should disagree with Dawkins, about why you should disagree with me. He just paints a general negative vibe. And that's just signaling to his readers that you're not supposed to like this. And for people that, come to their views through social norms, they just kind of absorb that and don't do the critical thinking. And I don't know. I don't want to get into this guy's head too much. I think I'm a little bit more hesitant than you to say why he's making certain choices that he's making. I don't know. I don't think I've read a single other thing from him. This is the only thing I've seen. I've never met him. I couldn't find him as having a Twitter account, so I didn't see his normal day-to-day commentary. But it seems to be the case that he just wants to hate. and why? Well, why? I just want to understand why.
Yeah, so the one thing I guess I'll say before we continue going down, everybody, down the article here, is I've read similar articles in recent years past criticizing the New Atheist, criticizing the Four Horsemen, by progressive journalistic or magazine outlets. And when we get into the meat of some of the stuff that they describe about when it comes to Dawkins's past, it's the same thing in all these other articles. Salon, there was a Salon article from a few years ago. I think there was an Atlantic article from a few years ago too, and a few other outlets where they go through this history and say, misogyny, racism, this, that, blah, blah, blah. It's the dude bro, sexist, racist, Islamophobic, homophobic, transphobic, atheist community, right? They want to do whatever they can to paint it. So yeah, I don't know this guy, but the talking points, they're regurgitated. It's the same talking points that I saw actually in all those other articles from like 2018, 2019, 2021, 2023. So it's like they have to toot the horn up. Dawkins is being successful. We got to take him down. We got to paint him as not one of our atheists. We don't care if he's trying to build a healthy community or still be a successful scientist. No. We have to find any way to chuck at him and to chuck at anybody he's associated with.
This is not just an issue that's limited to atheist discourse, though. I mean, this is a journalistic problem that's really, really gotten bad over the last decade, maybe, but it's grown gradually over time, and it's everywhere, and it's everything. It is just treated with this tone of, if something comes from somebody that I'm somewhat ideologically divorced from, then the same amount of journalistic rigor, the same generosity, it just doesn't apply. And, I'm totally entitled to just attack in a malicious way. And I think it grows out of a couple different things. But one of the things it grows out of is critic culture. People, journalists, or I guess they're not journalists. This is journalism, I guess, technically, because he's covering an event he went to, but writers that, I went to the movie that I'm reviewing, and I'm writing my movie review, or I'm writing a book review, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. And there's certainly a role for critics, right? You have to advise people who are making a purchasing decision. Should I go and buy this ticket?
Right.
And there's also a role for critical analysis, like thinking about the ideas that are in something. But there's also, I feel like, what happens in negative reviews of things much more frequently than that happens, is this high-minded snarkiness that's almost like an ego boost to the writer of, I am better. People who are like me or who think like me are better than what this piece of art or culture that I'm criticizing represents. And they write these really snarky things, and they seem to get socially rewarded for it because people do buy into that kind of narcissism. They believe it. They believe that person is more high-minded and that thing is bad. And I think it's really terrible, the extent to which our culture has normalized that. And I think that's something we have to start to turn the dial back on. Dawkins is somebody that's writing about ideas. You should feel free to criticize ideas, but when you criticize ideas, you should actually argue them. You should never criticize things that people are going to for entertainment. It's a show, it's a movie, it's a book, whatever, as just low in this way. It's rude to its audience of people that are going to like that thing. It's rude to the people that worked hard on it. And for what? It serves no value to anyone except a narcissistic smugness feeding them.
And then I'll just keep reading immediately after I say this. I promise all of you this, but like the Genetic Book of the Dead, science book. It's not even a book on atheism. It's not even a book on secularism. Obviously, he's inviting well-known atheists to be special guests in some cases, hosts in some cases, people that are not scientists in some cases. And obviously he was taking some Q&A questions about atheism and religion too. But like 90% of everything was about the Genetic Book of the Dead. What are you going to do? Try to go after evolution because this guy's, not a fan of social justice or what social justice has become, what wokeism has become, right? It's complete nonsense. So we'll keep going down the article here to keep you guys informed. So we have the article continuing in the third paragraph by saying millions of other creationists had similar experiences. Klein said. He credited.
Stop it there again. I've never been a creationist. I didn't say on stage I was a creationist. I think what he's getting that from is that what I said was Dawkins' work inspired people to stand against creationism in schools.
Yeah.
I'm sure that I had teachers that were creationists, but we were not. We had secular science classes in our school as well. I didn't go to like a Brooklyn yeshiva or something. I was never a creationist. I didn't say that. I want my correction. I know it's a minor thing, but it speaks to the attention to facts. I mean, later in this, he's going to put things in direct quotes that are approximately what I said, but they're not direct quotes. And it's just like, that's so sloppy. I mean, as you mentioned earlier, I just published a book, Redefining Racism. I was so careful about what I put in direct quotes in that book. I had conversations with my editors about, okay, well, a quote, I'm ending my sentence with this quote, but does the period go inside the quotation mark or outside the quotation mark? And you're telling me the editing rules are to put it inside the quotation mark, but I feel scummy about that because it wasn't actually the end of a sentence. And I don't want to misrepresent that as being like the end of his thought. Like, that's how careful I am when it comes to quoting somebody. So somebody that's working at the Atlantic, somebody that's working at a serious institution, even these like minor things in this scheme of communicating information, this is unprofessional and is not acceptable for somebody that's a professional journalist.
I hope he sees it. Well, some of our critics are going to clearly see this. They love obsessing over our content. So hopefully, for all, if any one of you have little bits of integrity left in you, maybe you can spread the message along. So let's see if that happens. I'll be paying attention quite a bit to my X feed on to the For You section and seeing if there's any updates on that. So Klein said he credited Dawkins with catalyzing an important triumph of reason over blind superstition. Klein's opening remarks to that point could have described Dawkins of 20-odd years ago when he was first going on the attack against religion's profligate wastefulness, its extravagant display of Baroque uselessness. But then things took a turn. Jake told the crowd that they couldn't afford to be complacent. Human ignorance was not yet wholly vanquished. Wokeness and conspiratorial thinking had arisen to take the place of religious faith.
Okay, let me stop it there. So human ignorance was not yet wholly vanquished. That's not what I said, and that's also a framing that's meant to make it look like that's something that's impossible. What I said was that anti-scientific dogma had not yet been vanquished. And of course, that's true. Like, if you care about a society, and what I was talking about, and I said this explicitly, a society that's responsive to evidence and reason, that's not the same as ignorance. Ignorance is a lack of knowledge. We will never fully conquer ignorance. What we should be able to conquer is, we should be able to understand our own psychological biases better, understand the rules of formal logic, and be able to apply that properly, and to be able to hopefully teach that in schools and instill that in people's thinking, so that these societal scale belief systems don't take root, that are contrary to things that we can know through hard evidence, are untrue. And I think that this, just calling that ignorance, insofar as, I mean, the most generous case is that he just misunderstood me or something. Mm-hmm. But in the most malicious case, what it is to say that it's to conflate those two things. It's to have this postmodernist kind of view on the world that, everything is just kind of narratives, and we can't really have hard knowledge of anything. So, to say that we could have this hard knowledge, that everybody should have this hard knowledge, no, that's just, that's just believing we're never going to conquer ignorance. No, that's not what it is. What it is to say is that there are things that we can know. It's not everything, but there are things that we can know. And we should not have systems that are promoting ideas that are in conflict with what we can concretely know to be true.
There's this one part at the end of this paragraph that I really want to go on a rant on for a moment. So I'll read to the end of this, and then we'll get into the meat of that.
Sorry. Let me say one more thing, actually, because you did another sentence there. Wokeness and conspiratorial thinking had arisen to take the place of religious faith. That's approximately what I said. He's going to paint me as this like right-wing guy. I am right-wing.
That's what I want to get into in a moment, because I'm just going to go all in on that.
Okay, good, because I am right-wing. I'm a libertarian. I think libertarianism is a right-wing philosophy. I'm happy to talk about that and take that label. But I picked that language kind of intentionally to be balanced, because I do think both sides have major issues with conspiracy theories. But if I had to pick which side is more associated with conspiracy theories and with conspiratorial thinking, it's the right. And so I picked that language very intentionally to try to be balanced in, with an audience that I knew was going to have a diverse political spectrum, something that I think this writer is going to try to deny about the audience if he hasn't already.
Exactly. So I'm going to read to the end, and then I want to get into this because this is so important. It's going to describe you. It's going to describe everybody in the audience here. So he finishes up this paragraph by saying, he said that Western civilization needed to defend itself against people who divide the world between the oppressors and the oppressed. He sounded a lot like J.D. Vance. Okay.
Wait, you missed an important sentence there. You skipped. Klein began ranting about cultural Marxists.
You evil conspiratorial thinker.
You do your rant now, and then I'll comment on that.
Marxists. He said that Western civilization should defend itself against people who divide the world between the oppressors and the oppressed. He sounded a lot like J.D. Vance. This is what is so disgusting here about this. The new atheist movement, guys, was never meant to be a progressive movement. It was never meant to be a conservative movement either. New atheism is new atheism. I remember being in an atheist movement where you had Democrats, libertarians, Republicans, and independents at atheist events and atheist conferences. Obviously, the atheist movement might have skewed a little bit one way politically, but I don't care if a religious theocrat is a left-wing Islamist or a right-wing theocrat, right-wing Christian theocrat, or tradpath, or Christ as King on X or whatever. Any kind of theocratic activism needs to be destroyed. Any kind of theocratic work against our secular republic needs to be opposed. If we can align with left-wingers to do that, great. If we can align with right-wingers to do that, great. That's what new atheism was really, really all about. And so this just exposes these people. This exposes this Atlantic writer. It exposes the people like the Hemet Metas. They don't want an atheist movement. They want a social justice movement. And if nonpartisan, healthy, non-woke, so where wokeness is not interfering in things, a healthy atheist movement like that gets in the way of them being successful with their own political agenda, then they would rather see a dead atheist movement. So, of course, they're going to say he sounded a lot like J.D. Vance. Okay, there are atheists who support J.D. Vance. There are atheists who support Kamala Harris, right? Who cares? Who cares about that? Who cares about that when it comes to a Richard Dawkins event, right? They don't care about that because they don't want to admit that they're contradicting what New Atheism was always about. And they know that. But they want to reframe the narrative of atheism and the atheist movement in this country. And that's what really, really, really gets me angry. And that's what makes Atheists for Liberty a threat. Because they know if they check out our advisory board, they know that there's non-woke Democrats that are on the advisory board, and they know that there are non-woke libertarians, non-woke conservatives that are on the advisory board too, and independents. They hate the fact that we are trying to build an organization that brings organized atheism back to how it used to be. They hate it and hate it and hate it, and they don't want us to be successful because of this. So they're going to say, he sounded a lot like J.D. Vance, because they want a progressive, not an atheist one. And that's it. It's just something that I think needs to be really said more. So that's why Jake Klein is a threat, because you are not this way. We're going to discredit any of your success because you just don't lean the way we want you to lean.
Yes, again, I think this is way broader of an issue than just atheist discourse. I think that there's this, you just put people in this bucket of the other, and you can just completely dismiss them. And so for your Democratic readership, I can associate somebody with some Republican. Well, ew. And that's kind of it. So I wore this shirt on purpose today. It's silly. I hope it's my Space Shroom shirt. I wore this because I don't think J.D. Vance would wear this shirt. I don't despise J.D. Vance, but J.D. Vance is not my philosophy, like, at all. I do identify as right-wing. I do care about protecting Western civilization. I think J.D. Vance cares about those things as well. I don't agree with, like, using the state to push all these institutions and government programs to try to do that. I'm really against that. I think that all this stuff has to happen through the private market, through private individual choices, through freedom. So J.D. Vance is not really my brand. And it just seems to me that for this writer, anyone who's a non-Democrat and, is vaguely anti-woke, that's just the J.D. Vance bucket. And it displays such a profound ignorance of the culture and the discourse outside of their bubble and all the different viewpoints that we have, I guess, within our side of the aisle. It's moronic. I mean, it's really profoundly ignorant to do that. I mean, Klein began ranting about cultural Marxism. Okay, I guess what one defines as a rant is arbitrary. So I said one sentence about cultural Marxism. He paraphrases that entire sentence in his next one. He said that Western civilization needed to defend itself against people who divide the world between the oppressors and the oppressed. That's approximately what I said, yes. That was the only thing I said about cultural Marxism in the entire thing. So, if he wants to call that a rant, I guess. But it seems a lot like just a malicious way to kind of paint me as some lunatic, extremist, concerned about things like that aren't real or something. I mean, it is real. It's very real. I wrote a whole book on what is essentially like cultural Marxism. I hope, some people allege that discussion of cultural Marxism is a anti-Jewish conspiracy theory. I hope that, like, my ethnic background can dispel like any sense that I'm using it in that way. That's absurd. What I mean, and what I said explicitly in the speech, is that, there's a Marxist narrative of the bourgeoisie stealing surplus value from the proletariat. And then there's a cultural Marxist narrative of this battle between oppressors versus oppressed. That can be along racial lines, along religious lines, along gender lines, along whatever it may be. That's real. I mean, that's clearly happening. That's what we're complaining about when we complain about the woke. And I do think that Western civilization needs to defend itself against that, because we saw what it did in Marxist nations. And it can cause enormous harm here. In some ways, it's starting to already. Nothing like, my God, nothing like the Soviet Union. But we do have to be ever vigilant of ever getting to a society like that. Societies degrade over time if they're not upkept. And, things happen. I can't remember who this quote I need to attribute it to, but it's a wonderful quote. It's totally correct. Things happen slowly and then they happen all at once. And when we see these divisive ideas that we can't all as a society like prosper and lift up together, right? That we have a fixed pie society where some people inherently are living off, the people that they're exploiting. That's where civil wars come from. That's where all sorts of just hostility and conflict comes from. And I'm not saying that civil war is like around the corner, but it could happen down the line. And when it happens, it probably won't be as expected and predictable as people might hope that it would be. So yeah, I mean, I believe that that's a problem. I believe that cultural Marxism, defined in the way that I defined it, is a problem. And I'm not ashamed of that. And I don't think that makes me like JD Vance. I think that makes me a concerned human being. I think that should be a centrist viewpoint that should be held widely. I mean, so many of the people that, I know that share this view, they're ex-Democrats. They believe in some form of social welfare. They believe there should be a safety net, but they don't believe in this pure like equalitarianism. For anybody to profit, somebody else has to be exploited. Vision of the world where it's all just a power struggle. And there is a growing amount of people that really do believe that. So yeah, I mean, I'm not sorry that I believe that and that I advocated against that. I think that's an important cause.
So he continues, the day before on a video call, Dawkins told me that he was puzzled, disquieted by the support he received from the political right. He tends to support the Labor Party.
Mere associations. How awful.
Yeah. How awful. So of course he's trying to paint Dawkins as some hypocrite. He tends to support the Labor Party. He loathes Donald Trump. The new atheist movement arose partly in response to the ascent of George W. Bush and other evangelicals in Republican politics. So here's the thing. He knows that opposing the religious right was not the only reason why new atheism popped up. It's also due to opposing Islamism, opposing religion in general, and supporting secular governance, supporting skepticism, promoting science and reason. He knows that opposing the religion was just this one part of a vast movement that's meant to shape the West and the world. But of course, he's trying to do what he can to be as negative and, yes, like you were talking about earlier, as snarky kind of as possible.
Also, again, he's trying to tie this back to me, given the previous paragraph. He's trying to use me as evidence of right-wing affiliations for Dawkins. Again, like, okay, maybe he knows some people that Ayaan Hirsi Ali is clearly right-wing. She's worked at the Hoover Institution for forever.
PragerU, she's made videos for PragerU.
Right. Like I don't think Dawkins is bothered by that much. But to then do it with this George W. Bush sentence, I think George W. Bush was the worst president in my lifetime. I'm not a neoconservative. I'm so thankful. I'm more of a Republican now than I ever have been, because the political landscape has changed. And being anti-war is so much more acceptable now on the political right than it ever has been. So I agree. I agree. It did rise in response to George W. Bush and the evangelicalism of the time. I'm still on board. Nothing's changed. Yeah.
Like, I'm still opposed to creationism in public schools. I'm still opposed to right-wing Christian theocracy, just like I'm opposed to left-wing Christian theocracy, just like I'm opposed to Islamic theocracy. Anybody who uses woke or social justice stuff to promote faith, we've seen this in BLM. We've seen this with woke BLM flags, by the way, guys, in front of churches. But, oh, no, we can't criticize that because they support our new religion, so we're going to just pretend that doesn't exist. So you could see what's happening still in the article, everybody here. So its leaders, Dawkins, along with Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, and Daniel Dennett, worried that public school students would soon be learning creationism in biology class. But there has since been a realignment in America's culture wars. Americans still fight over the separation of church and state, but arguments about evolution have almost completely vanished from electoral politics and the broader zeitgeist. That's actually it's somewhat true, but it's actually not. I would actually argue that a lot of it's actually coming back now. I've been saying this in a lot of our videos recently, that anti-woke stuff has actually like been in the political zeitgeist for so many years. But now the debates over religion and atheism and creationism is returning, and it's only bringing these conversations to light even more. And I think this guy knows it too. Otherwise, I don't think this article would still would even exist. They know that this debate is returning, and they don't want atheism fighters to be, well, non-woke, normal, rational people.
I think that you're correct. I think that we see this resurgence in Christian nationalism, which I think is terrible. And, it's an interesting subject, though, because I do think that it's the case that our culture is, in a lot of ways, both in good ways and bad ways, the evolution of a Christian culture that came before it. Bad cultures are as well. I think there's a very strong argument that Tom Holland makes about that Marxism grew out of the ethics of Christianity. So he's not the only one that's made that. Many have made that case. But Dawkins has identified as a cultural Christian. And what I said in my speech was that there are things that we need to preserve that are great in our civilization that may be the product of Christianity, but we need to be able to save those things without all the nonsense, without the false fact claims. And
here's what's so funny. Oh, sorry.
Well, these Christian nationalists, they don't want that. They want to force the entire thing down our throats and have us live in a theocracy. And it is, I don't think, listen, it's still fringe in the scope of society, but it's enough of us. It's enough of a subset that it's reasonable to be concerned about, and to not just wanted to keep your eye on it and make sure it doesn't grow more. And
we need to be on the front lines against it. And here's what's so, I know you just mentioned this about this new religious right too. With him saying he's a cultural Christian, personally, I'm not a fan of him even saying that. But here's what's so interesting about Dawkins saying it. When he was actually asked about that, he said that, I call myself that, but I'm against Christianity. He is so still militantly atheistic against Christianity. And then not only that, when the conservative movement and conservative media tried to drag him in, I think he must have, a viral clip of him saying that he's a cultural Christian came out in April or May or sometime earlier in the year. Everybody then tried to say, aha, see, this is Richard Dawkins saying he agrees with us that we need Christianity, that atheism failed. And no, that quote of him also saying that he's a cultural Christian, he's been saying it as far back as 2007, when he was promoting the God delusion. So this is what's so funny about that too. Richard Dawkins is still very much against plenty of what you would call, unfortunately, socially conservative, but really theocratic. I don't even like to call it socially conservative, theocratic things that some people on the right still do promote. But this writer is not going to acknowledge that at all. They want to just paint him as, oh, he's totally in line with all this stuff. He's a hypocrite. He says he loves Donald Trump, but look at this, look at that, blah, blah, blah. No, he's just a new atheist that he's always been. He's always been the same way. He's just a nice, quiet British man at the same time. And by cultural Christian, he means in this kind of British sense that he just likes the look of churches. Like if you ask a lot of people that even
He
work
likes
within the Church of England, they don't even believe in God. Like half of the people in the Church of England don't even believe.
He likes
like,
Christmas. He likes neighborliness, right? There's when you talk about Christianity, you're talking about the whole package. And that's a package deal with a lot in there that is not right. When you say cultural Christian, you're restricting the package. When I say there's things that we should take from Christianity that are important, I'm not talking about the whole package. So of course, the package in this fundamental like belief system that, you know, this is divine, and so you have to believe all of it and you have to follow all of it. Because God said so, that's toxic, and it leads people in a lot of bad places.
So we'll have we'll continue down here. He loads Donald Trump. The new atheist movement arose partly in response to the ascent of George W. Bush and other evangelicals in Republican politics. Its leaders, Dawkins, along with Sam Harris, Christopher Hitchens, and Daniel Dennett, worried that public school students would soon be learning creation in biology class. But there seems to be a realignment in America's culture wars. Americans still fight over the separation of church and state. I'm reading this fast because we've already read it. But arguments about evolution have almost completely vanished from electoral politics and the broader zeitgeist. With no great crusade against creationism to occupy him, Dawkins's most visible moments over the last 15 years have been not as a scientist, but as a crusader against wokeness. Notice how he tries to put that in quotes, even before that was the preferred term. Good for him for sticking up for science and for sticking up as an advocate for free speech. Oh no. So here we get into a bit of the typical stuff that I've heard in all the other progressive articles against Dawkins over the last few years, which is what I was saying earlier. Dawkins, the culture warrior, could be snide, off the cuff, and downright toxic. In 2011, the atheist blogger Rebecca Watson spoke about the discomfort she felt when a man followed her into an elevator early in the morning at a global atheist conference in Ireland. Dawkins, the most famous atheist of all, responded by posting a sarcastic letter to a hypothetical woman in the Muslim world, asking her to think of the suffering you poor American sisters have to put up with. The Dear Muslima letter, by the way, everybody. That's what he's talking about with. A few years later, a Muslim teen in Texas was handcuffed and detained by authorities after showing his teacher a clock that he'd made, which she mistook for a bomb. Dawkins weighed in to argue that the boy had only pretended to make the clock and that he might have wanted to get arrested. In 2021, he tweeted a just asking questions request for a discussion of the differences between trans people and Rachel Dolezal, once the president of a local NAACP chapter who deceptively identified as Black. Okay, so I'm just going to quickly comment here. Not even going to go into the elevator gate nonsense. That was just a bunch of garbage. For anybody who wants to see our commentary on elevator gate 10 years later after it happened, we in 2021 published an article about elevator gate 10 years later. Go to atheistforliberty.org and check out our opinion section. I actually will actually include that in the description of this video too for anybody who wants to read it, because it's, of course, they continue to bring up that old, silly, stupid story because they want to paint it as the atheist movement has always been misogynistic. It's garbage, 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 woke garbage. Of course, they're going to make him look like an Islamophobe, blah, blah, blah. As if the term Islamophobe is really a bad thing. So of course, this is just the typical jargon you'll see in Salon. You'll see in all these articles they came out with over the last like 7 to 8 years about the movement.
I want to comment on this. So,
sure.
You know, elevator gate, obviously ridiculous. Rachel Dolezal, very well deserving of criticism. This one about the clock, I had not heard that before.
Yeah,
and
2014.
So I clicked through to the link just now and quickly like scanned that article. This is a total misrepresentation of what Dawkins said. So to quote the Atlantic article, Dawkins weighed in to argue that the boy had only pretended to make the clock. That's not really what he said. What he said was that like when you put these innards in a box, like that's doesn't look like a clock. Like that's not, you know, like that's not a clock. Like it might function as a clock, it might be a clock, but it's you have like clock innards in a box. Like that's not what a clock looks like. And so this, I think what he was meant was that this language around calling that like a clock, just like a normal clock, is totally manipulative, and that's the hoax. Not that he was like pretending to, that he was really actually was making the bomb. That was not the allegation.
To get the kid.
Yeah.
He was trying to no, I think he meant like, it's good to be skeptical. It's good to be skeptical. There are incidents where stuff like this has actually happened. People make mistakes. And what's the problem with investigating this thing that might not actually look like a clock, right? Make sure that it's not a bomb and not make it look like this massive civil rights violation.
Right. Yeah. So all of this here, I mean, that one's a misrepresentation, but I think it's worthy of note that there's no actual arguments in this paragraph. He does not argue why any of these things were wrong for Dawkins to do. He just talks about it in a smug way and thinks that his audience should agree with him.
Yeah, exactly.
That's very shallow.
Of course, that's been the vast majority of articles written against Dawkins. So this is why it's like nothing really surprises me anymore. It's unfortunately I have to go into reading these articles kind of already knowing where they're going to go, because while Dawkins is now attacking wokeness, he's been critical of a lot of different things, a lot of different bad ideas, and because he's not only critical of the religious right anymore, oh no, he needs to be stopped. So now we go after talking about evil Jake Klein again. When Klein kicked off the event at the Warner Theater with a warning about the spread of cultural Marxism, Dawkins' fan cheered him on loudly. The only time I heard a bigger response was when Dawkins himself finally took the stage wearing a gray suit, blue shirt, and white covered in crocoducks, imaginary creatures that figure prominently in a creationist argument against evolution. He looked 10 to 15 years younger than President Biden, our current standard candle for octogenarian fitness.
He really does. He's doing great. Dawkins is doing great.
But of course he's trying to do whatever he can to try to get any kind of insult. His gin dry wit is largely intact, and in the U.S. he could still coast on his English accent and habits of speech. His quite and his lovely, his tendency to end sentences with a lifting isn't it, his occasional offer to have a go, but he stops more frequently to collect his thoughts. It's not as easy for him to purr along in the same pleasingly nasal cadence for long stretches at a time. Okay, fine, that's just due to age, I guess, but I don't, what's the attack here? Yeah, he's older. Oh no, that's called being a human. I will say this too. There was a Q&A question where actually Dawkins was talking about his mortality. I think there was a question that was asked at the end about his mortality. He takes it all very, very well. He really does. More than I would. Because like now I'm 26 and like, a lot of people really question where their lives are going in a quarter, of where they are, midlife crisis once they reach like 50 or above. And then I guess sometimes like in the latter stages of life. He's very cheerful still about everything. And that's what I appreciate most of all about him. He's still very cheerful in that sense, so I wanted to also state that too. We'll still go forward for the, seeing these next paragraphs. Jake, I don't know if you wanted to say anything about what I read out here.
No, he's doing great. His Britishisms are very nice.
Yeah.
He was very polite to me and my fiance. I think that's wonderful. This is probably you're saying that he's saying this to say something negative, but this is probably like his except for the beginning of this paragraph. This is probably doing like the bare minimum he has to do of being genuinely nice to try to not look like he's a total hack, but then he's going to go right back into being a total hack.
Sprinkle this in. Oh, fine. The format for the evening was a fireside chat between Dawkins and the economist and Freakonomics author Stephen Levitt. They began with a discussion of natural selection and stayed in that general register for quite a while. There were flashes of Dawkins in his prime. At one point, he slipped into a fluid 5-minute riff on the extended phenotype. The basic idea original to him is that an organism's genome will determine more than just its body makeup and behavior. It may also shape inanimate objects, as in the case of a bird and its nest, or other organisms. As with a parasite and its host, considered in a certain light, a human's phenotype could include not just a layer of technology that we have wrapped around our planet, but also the space probes that we have flung beyond the solar system's borders. It's a grand thought. For nearly an hour, Dawkins struck largely to science, and it served him well. The latter half of the evening was heavier on culture war material. To whoops and hollers, Dawkins expressed astonishment that anyone could believe that sex is a continuum instead of a straightforward binary. He described safety craving college students as pathetic wimps. Yes, I love that, by the way. It all seemed small compared with the majesty of the ideas he'd been discussing just minutes before. Yeah, because he should be outraged that as a former professor and as an educator, that modern education in this country and in the West has just gone downhill so quickly. Yes, because of wokeness. Yes, because of social justice. Yes, because of people not being able to have their ideas criticized without needing safety. Or I saw my friend Brad Palumbo was just on the news recently talking about how this one college needed to market themselves around the Care Bears or something like that to make students feel safe. This is not just some meme of like 2017, 2018 culture wars of, oh, colleges are blah, 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 not great anymore. There's a reason why we're still talking about it like 8 years later, because it's not going away. And so Richard Dawkins should be, yes, livid, yes, annoyed at what our education system has become. I don't blame him for that at all. I was one of the people in the audience who cheered him on when he said that quote, when he called them pathetic wimps. And of course, they're going to make it look like he feels this way about all college students, that he feels this way about everybody who goes to these institutions. So you can just see how they're trying to make him look like the bully.
You
How he
know,
describes him as a bully or troll. So stupid.
if this author thinks that it feels small, if he thinks that it's, not majestic enough and that it's not what he enjoys hearing about, don't come. Don't come. You knew that that was going to be part of the discussion, likely. It's not for you. Not everybody has to be interested in all the same things.
Yeah.
It was interesting to me. It was interesting to you. It was interesting to much of the audience. For a lot of us, that is a very important issue. The culture is an important issue, as is science and evolution. They're very different. But they're both important in different ways, and especially if you're a professor, which Dawkins still is at Oxford. And I've just heard this story from professor after professor after professor about how their classrooms are changing, about how they have to change their curricula, not because they're saying anything offensive, but because they're saying things that might be like perceived as possibly offensive to somebody who is wrong and it's not offensive. And they're constantly like on nerve that they're going to cross some tripwire that like they didn't even know existed because of this safetyist victimhood culture. That's a real concern if you're a professor. So I'm sorry, you're a writer for The Atlantic. Maybe in your world, that doesn't matter as much. Not everything is for you. Don't come. Don't come to write a smarmy hit piece. You did not need to be part of this.
It's the same talking points as the Salon article that came out against the New Atheist a few years ago. It's the same stuff. Rebecca wants an elevator. Blah 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 blah. It's like you knew already what this guy was going to say. I just knew the moment Hammett shared this article on his feed. I knew what this article was immediately going to be about, and I was not wrong. I was not wrong at all. The only thing I'll also say, because of course they'll go after us by saying, "Oh, you didn't even get your facts right." Dawkins taught at Oxford. I think he retired. I think in like 2012 or 2013
I
from
thought,
teaching there. But he still gives educational lectures. He's still involved. I think he's still like probably goes to campus. I wouldn't be surprised.
I don't know. I thought my dad spoke to him at the event. and asked that question, like, what university, like, are you at? And he said he was still affiliated with the university, but maybe not as an actively teaching professor. I don't know. So my apologies if I got that wrong.
How dare you, Jake? How dare you?
I actually care about facts. I don't think I'm going to get an
Yeah.
apology from this writer for calling me a creationist,
No.
amongst
Yeah.
other
You're
things.
not going to get an
Yeah.
apology from the writer, and he's going to go after you. He's going to go after you. He's going to say, "You didn't even get your fact." Yeah, of course, like watch that just be the case. But you know what? Hey, we're open to being proven wrong here. So let's see if that actually happens, but I doubt it. So we got him saying next, near the night's end, Dawkins told the old story of Tofrim Lysenko, Stalin's chief agronomist. Lysenko did not believe in Mendelian genetics. He thought that after sprouting, crops could acquire new traits and pass them down to their seedlings, as he did not care to hear counter evidence. To the contrary, he brutally persecuted the scientists who disagreed with him. More than 3,000 biologists were fired, arrested, or executed, and yet they were not the most numerous victims of Lysenko's closed-mindedness, not by a long shot. Under his influence, agricultural production in the Soviet Union and China suffered grievously. Historians estimate that his policies may have led to millions of famine deaths. I'll keep going here. The tale of Lysenko is almost fable-like in its moral purity, and Dawkins told it well, but only as a setup for a contemporary controversy that he wished to discuss, an ongoing dispute over school curricula in New Zealand. According to one proposal, students there would learn traditional creation stories and myths alongside standard science lessons at a deference to the Maori. I think I'm not butchering that, whose language and culture British settlers tried earnestly to erase. Of course, you got to get in that anti-colonialism. Haha, take that, Dawkins. All right. Dawkins noted that some eminent New Zealand scientists had stuck their heads above the parapet. Probably butchered that as well. To object to the idea with an open letter in 2021, and were unpleasantly punished for doing so. He called this mob rule and expressed concern for the young students. They could end up confused, he said, forced as they would be to reconcile lessons about the Sky Father and Earth Mother uh, with those that concern the Big Bang and evolution. I don't know, Jake, if you want to provide any commentary there on that.
This is exactly what being against creationism in our schools here was about. This is a religious narrative in New Zealand. It should not be taught as science. And he's going to get into the consequences or alleged lack thereof for taking this stance for scientists. But yeah, it should not even be a fear. And I think that what this writer is saying really goes to just how corrupting this social justice ideology can be against the values of evidence and reason. Like, either for this writer, that was something he maybe never cared about. I mean, he's a science journalist, so I would hope he cared about it at least at one point. But that this ideology has encouraged him to throw it out because the Maori are oppressed. Now, listen, you know, I talked about cultural Marxism and, you know, oppressor versus oppressed dichotomies before. I don't want that to be misunderstood. There is real oppression, okay? But there's not like this fixed pie society where, you know, some have to lose for others to gain. And the Maori and other indigenous peoples across the world really were oppressed. Bad. Okay. I don't think it's like that now. I don't know much about the culture in New Zealand. So I won't venture to comment on that.
There was bigotry. There was genocide back in those days. There was plenty of discrimination. No doubt about that. I think any sane person in the West will acknowledge that. I think Richard Dawkins would acknowledge that.
I would hope so.
But of course, they're going to still do whatever they can to connect Dawkins to anything bad about that past, or make him look like an oppressor who's, you know, criticizing superstition, but of an oppressed group, so it's okay. Let them have their superstition because they're in the hierarchy of this religion of wokeness and intersectionality. The oppressed group will let them have their beliefs.
They
But
can.
no, let's go after the
Yeah,
Christianity and Christian beliefs. Let's go after all forms of superstition. Let's
I
criticize
agree with that.
all bad ideas of
They
oppressed and
can.
oppressor.
They can have their religion. Okay.
Yeah, they can
That
have their freedom to
I
believe whatever
believe
they
in
want to believe.
freedom of religion there, and I believe in freedom of religion for Christians here.
Yeah,
But there's a difference between that and in taxpayer funded public schools, the schools that everybody that's in New Zealand now has to pay for, regardless of how their ancestors got there.
yeah,
That they should have to fund bullshit. Okay. If the Maori want to, and I'm sure that they do this on some scale, set up private schools and teach their own kids their beliefs. I do have some problems with that if their beliefs are wrong, and their beliefs are wrong, but I believe in their freedom to do it. Okay. I do not believe in their freedom to force that into taxpayer funded public schools. And if
yeah.
that's offensive to somebody, I'm fucking sorry. I don't care. I just don't care. This is wrong. This is where I'm drawing my line in the sand. And it's the exact same fight that we were having 20 years ago. So, this author, this whole narrative of the piece is that, Dawkins has passed his prime. It's not relevant anymore. We're on to other fights. He's nitpicking about stupid things. To pick this example and trying to make that case is so egregious because, again, this is directly, 100% the creationism fight that we were having here. It just happens to be different groups involved. And if you can't carry through that principle, then you don't have principles, period.
Yeah, exactly. This is Richard Dawkins being the Richard Dawkins who we always known him to be. But of course, he's going after a different group, so we can't acknowledge the good parts of what he's doing. So they continue. He continues. I suspect that kids can hold on those two things in mind. I suspect also that the project of science, no innocent bystander in the treatment of indigenous people, will best be served if its most prominent voices address themselves to the Maori and to such groups in an imaginative spirit of synthesis and reconciliation. But even if I am wrong about all of that,
God,
of course, look at how poetic and how progressive he's being, Jake. Okay,
this is ridiculous. I suspect that kids can hold those two things in mind. Yeah, okay. Teach it in a cultural history course. That's fine. Teach a religions course where you talk about what various groups believe. This does not belong in a science class. I don't know all the details of
creationism is okay as long as it supports us and our objective. Get the picture, Jake. Didn't you hear that before coming on?
It really is that shallow too, and that's really depressing. You're saying it in a mocking tone, but that's not different than the argument. You're basically saying the exact words of the argument. I suspect that kids can hold these two things in mind. I don't know what age these kids are, and you're going to make it hard for them to keep it in mind if you teach it as a competing scientific theory. There are contexts this can be taught in. By all means, do it. I support that. I think here in America, I really wish actually that we were more connected to Native American history and culture. I'm fascinated by it. I don't know about as much about it as I would like. And I think there's this root and this connection to the land that was very important in their culture that for the people that are here now, we don't have that same connection. And I think it's beautiful. And I would like to have that. And so I'm sure that there's all these beautiful things about Maori culture that I would love, that New Zealanders maybe do love, maybe should love. I don't know. Not in a science class. Come on.
I'll go on by reading. I'll read the next paragraph and a half, and then we'll go over that. He continues, of course, being the poetic progressive that he is. But even if I am wrong about all that, the specter of Lysenko would seem to have little bearing on a case in which no scientist has been officially punished. Complaints about the open letter did produce an initial investigation by the Royal Society. I'm not even going to attempt. K. Aprangi as a matter of process, but nothing more. Yes, I might have butchered that. Okay, I might have actually butchered that.
So there was let's be clear here, but nothing more. Okay, listen, if I'm one of these people that's scared to come out, okay, and I know that my coming out is going to get complaints against me that could potentially get fired, that there's going to be an investigation. Okay, yeah, good. The investigation didn't get worse. The fucking whole process should not have happened. And if I'm an academic, if I have children, a family, a mortgage, and this is hanging over my head, that is awful. And that is unacceptable. And nobody should feel empowered to make complaints for somebody registering their issue, a scientist registering their issue with the teaching of non-science as science in science classes. That's horrible.
Well, this is exactly what I said. They don't care about atheism. They don't care about science or skepticism. They care about social justice more. So if you're violating this new religion, then you're a problem. They'll promote theocracy as long as it fits their narrative.
This writer is exactly what I warned about in my speech. Exactly a messenger of the ideology that we need to protect Western civilization, the civilization of the Enlightenment and the development of science from. You'll share the text of my opening speech, I'm sure, in the video description. Please, I hope people will read it because it's shocking. And it's evidence. I hope that this will serve for evidence towards my argument.
And once we get more information from the Dawkins team about footage pertaining to the opening remarks by the special guest, and we've had plenty of Atheists for Liberty people, by the way, involved in this tour. I'm going to be actually doing exactly what Jake did in a few days in Portland. So we have, and plenty of others. Emma Muniz, who just did a fantastic job in Boston. Salome, who is also has also volunteered with us and is with Jake. She has done a phenomenal job. We got Michael Shermer, we got Colin Wright, we got so many, Angel Eduardo, so many great people involved in this tour. They don't like that we are becoming successful. They don't like that we are continuing what Dawkins started us off on. So, of course, we're going to see this last big insult, him really being this righteous fighter that he is, this journalist. So let's go ahead and read the jargon here. Dawkins seems to have lost his sense of proportion. Now that mainstream culture has moved on from the big debates about evolution and theism, they're coming back, by the way, so no. He no longer has a prominent foe that so perfectly suits his singular talent for explaining the creative power of biology. And so he's playing whack-a-mole, swinging full strength and without much discernment, or anything that strikes him as even vaguely irrational. Nonsense. His fans of the Warner Theater didn't seem to mind. Yeah, because we're normal new atheists. We've always been that way for the last 20 years. For all I know, some of them had come with the sole intent of hearing Dawkins weigh in on the latest campus disputes and cancellations. Oh, no! After he took his last bow, the lights went out. And I tried to understand what I was feeling. I didn't leave the show offended. I wasn't upset. It was something milder than I thought. I was bored.
So you don't sound bored, dude. You sound real angry.
You sound real angry. So I'm going to go on my tangent, and then Jake, I'll let you close. I'll fill you guys in on some drama that's happened within the atheist community recently when it comes to Atheists for Liberty. I've been told by prominent people, and we were told about this by the late Woody Kaplan, who died in 2023. I can reveal this now. Basically, there are certain prominent atheists who actually made important contributions to the Secular Coalition for America that have been barred from getting back on the board or getting on the board of the Secular Coalition for America because of their associations with Atheists for Liberty. Anybody, any prominent new atheist that contributed to the old vanguard that has now been a lot of these orgs. I'm not saying every single one, but pretty much that apparatus that's been engulfed by this new religion of social justice that doesn't really have a market much anymore, that's not doing anything to actually really advance atheism and secularism and skepticism. They'll only go after certain parts of religion or whatever if it goes against the social justice stuff, but everything else, they're not doing anything actually edgy and atheistic that'll actually get crowds like Dawkins still actually gets. They are threatened by the success of Jake Klein. They are threatened by the continued success of Richard Dawkins. They are threatened by Atheists for Liberty continue to make success. They're threatened by our advisory board. They're threatened by 17-year-old Emma Muniz from New York City, who did a great job in Boston, Massachusetts. They're threatened by Shermer, Colin Wright, Angel Eduardo, all of us. They don't want us to succeed. So they're really angry. They said to people like us, don't come to our conferences. You're all misogynists. You're all racist. You're all Islamophobes. You're all homophobes. Get out of our community. We would rather, they always say this, we would rather work with theistic people that love social justice than bigoted atheists who don't. And we're not bigots. We're not bigots. We're normal people. A lot of us were like liberals like 10 years ago. We're normal people, left and right, who made this new atheist movement successful. But we listened to you guys. We listened to you, Hemant. We listened to you, Atlantic Author. We listened to you, PZ. And we left and we did our own thing. We are building and continuing to build what was successfully that old movement that you guys described as evil and misogynistic and whatever. Because you guys don't actually care about atheism. You don't want Jake to win. You don't want me to win. You don't want Dawkins to keep winning. So you're not actually bored. You want to make sure that we don't win. It's not that just you don't want us associated with you guys anymore. You don't want us to thrive anywhere at all. And you're going to do whatever you guys can to make that happen. And we don't care. And we're going to laugh about it in your face. And we're going to keep reporting on your nonsense too. While more and more atheists that used to support you guys when you guys were nonpartisan, when you guys were good guys, keep getting crazier and crazier and more partisan. And we're going to win. So time will only show that. So keep writing your articles, keep claiming that you're bored, keep claiming that we're irrelevant. We all know the truth. You're threatened by us, and you're threatened by Jake, and you're threatened still by Richard Dawkins, who has made all of you successful, and you know it.
That's a great wrap up. I don't have too much to say. That story about the Secular Coalition is very disappointing to hear. I did not know that. I'm not like super bothered by the attacks in this article against me. Yeah. I don't think they're going to have any impact on my life. No. But when I see things like this, it makes me very disappointed and sad about society and about humanity. And I just think the negativity, the hostility, just don't write hit pieces against people that you once admired because they don't agree with you about certain aspects of politics. It's sad, and I hope that things change. I don't know if they will, but we are a part of building new institutions to replace those old institutions that have succumbed to this. These new institutions are very much growing, have grown immensely over the last couple of years. And if this is how it's going to be, that we just exist in our separate institutions, I think then so be it. I think that's fine. But ultimately, right, for the time being at least, we live in one country with each other. And it would be nice if we could at least respect each other enough to not be scumbags. If you want to disagree with Dawkins, if you want to disagree with me, disagree with our arguments. Don't just, malign Dawkins as like an aging, fading, like angry, like whatever. Engage with what he has to say. I try to do my best to do that. I have this book here, Redefining Racism. I just published it earlier this week. This is all about issues in wokeness that I found, issues with these social justice activists that I think spread a really horrible ideology that has increased racial divisions in our country rather than brought people together, that has entrenched racism rather than brought it down. And you know what I do with them? I actually try to engage with all the things that they say. I quote them as much as possible, as much as I can. I try to analyze their arguments like step by step. I express my disagreements with those arguments. And that's what you should do, man. Like, if you really believe in this ideology, that's how you should practice it. I don't think it's going to hold up to scrutiny. I don't think this guy's views are going to hold up to scrutiny, but at least play the game. Don't just seek to destroy and malign anything that you perceive as a threat to your worldview. It's not productive.
No, not at all. And guys, you know, we really are trying to do what we can to be fair here. We really do have a very, very diverse range of members, of volunteers, activists, and people that want to really form community here at Atheists for Liberty. We have a growing membership. We have a growing subscriber base on YouTube and other platforms. So what really ask that you guys support this organization, become a member today, subscribe, follow us wherever you're seeing this on social media. And also, guys, you know, we're going to be airing this while Richard Dawkins is still on tour. Go to richarddawkinstour.com. That's RichardDawkinstour.com and buy tickets. Buy tickets. The tour, all the tour stops, I've been told continuously, have just been absolutely beautiful. The DC one that Jake spoke at was very, very beautiful. It was great. There was demand. The audience was packed. I'm hoping that the same, you know, a very similarly packed audience is in Portland, Oregon when I do exactly what Jake did as well. And you can buy tickets for all that and more of his appearances in that link. Will include those details in the description below too. You know, this was a very long recording, but we really wanted to get to the details of all this because, you know, we really want to show you all how truthful and how honest we actually are. It's one of the reasons why I heavily respect Jake and why Jake and I have been chatting for years. You know, Jake emailed me once in 2020 just expressing profound admiration for this organization and what we were doing. And even when, you know, Jake was doing other stuff he had to do for his career, we always stayed in touch. And eventually, Jake got even way more involved in this organization. And I'm proud to call Jake a good friend of mine and an amazing activist, an amazing journalist, and hopefully a very, very, very successful author. So we'll have more details of his book as well and everything below and maybe have some more appearances to talk about that. Jake, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a good experience as always, and we'll always keep bringing you on the channel, my friend.
Thank you, Thomas.
Take care, everybody. We'll see you next time.